Thank you very much, Bob. Can everybody hear me okay in the back and over on the side? Steve, can you hear me? Good. Well, I'm really very happy to be here and kind of embarrassed that Bob Kafka and Mike Oxford thought that I would be a good keynote on the topic of personal assistance services, because they know a hell of a lot more about that topic than I do. But I am honored to be here, and I'm happy to share some thoughts with you all. I want to just start by acknowledging and thanking Charlene Harrington, Mitch LaPlante, Steve Kay, and everybody involved with this ROTC. I think that I know NITRE funds a lot of ROTCs, and AAPD is involved with a number of them. But I think that the work that's been done in this ROTC is a great example of doing research and analysis that is directly relevant to the core priorities of the disability rights movement, and that is directly relevant to policymakers who are trying to make a change in Washington. And if the other ROTCs operated in a similar vein, I think we would have better policy, and the advocacy community would have more tools in our arsenal as we're trying to push for social change. So again, I just want to acknowledge the leadership of the team that is leading this effort for the PAS ROTC. I also just want to say the relationship with Bob personally, the relationship with ADAPT organizationally is very important to me and to AAPD. ADAPT is the organization that forces change in policy, and in that process, a lot of other people, including AAPD, kind of follow in their wake. But if we didn't have ADAPT, if we didn't have the leadership within ADAPT, I think a lot of the progress that we've seen, as slow as it's been, a lot of the progress we've seen on balancing the spending on institutional care versus the spending on home and community-based care would not have happened. And I mean that sincerely. And I encourage everybody in this room to come on Sunday at 1 o'clock at Upper Senate Park to the ADAPT fundraiser and fun run, which should be a good time. The other thing I wanted to say, just in the way of acknowledgments, is Steve Tingus, as the head of the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, came from the grassroots of the disability community. And one thing that I've noticed at NITRE under Steve's leadership is that there's more of an emphasis on meaningful collaboration between researchers and grassroots organizations than I've ever seen, since I've been in Washington, which started in 1993. So, Steve, I really want to acknowledge your leadership for using your influence to make sure that the NITRE grantees are partnering with and in powerful relationships with grassroots disability leaders and organizations. And Steve, I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. So Bob told you I have bipolar disorder. Some other stuff about me that Bob may not know. My first introduction to the field of disability policy was when I was a law student at Stanford Law School, and I did a paper on the California In-Home Supportive Services Program for my class on seniors and the law. And my favorite thing about that paper was I got to go up to Sacramento, and I met with Emma Gunterman. Okay, Emma Gunterman is a woman, I don't know if she's still alive. When I met with her, she was probably about 85, and she rode her bike to work every day. And she was somebody in California who was a definite player in getting the In-Home Supportive Services program off the ground. And I think she's a great example of a grassroots leader who was wearing primarily the over 65 hat, but who was making a huge difference on the lives of people with disabilities at all ages. And I think one of our tasks is to find the Emma Guntermans in every state capital around the country, because they exist, and make sure that the independent living centers and the other grassroots disability organizations are collaborating with our partners who are the activists coming from the seniors' perspective, like an Emma Gunterman. I also am on a federal advisory panel called the Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Advisory Panel, and we have created a committee of the panel called the Transformation Committee that is trying to develop, it's a bipartisan panel, and we're trying to develop a new way to provide long-term services and supports, income supports, health care, that does not require people to swear that they're unable to work in order to get supports, that does not require people to stay in poverty in order to get supports. It's easier said than done. Our panel is going to sunset at the end of this year, so be on the lookout for what I hope will be a pretty revolutionary report coming out of the panel that we're calling our National Employment Investment Strategy. And the reason we use the word investment is we feel like one of the biggest problems with federal policy and state policy around people with disabilities is that to a large extent, it's still about warehousing people, it's not about investing in them. So we've got an institutional bias, that obviously has a warehousing component, but even people who are living in the community, when they try to really come into the middle class, they try to save a little money, they try to move up, be socially upwardly mobile, they often get beaten down by the system, and that's just, to me, another form of warehousing. So again, I think if we can move policy in the direction of investing in people, recognizing their potential to be a good investment and to have a return on that investment, I think we're going to have better policy over the long haul, and I think that we could get bipartisan support for that. So the title for my talk today is Justice Delayed, Modernizing Personal Assistance Services Policy in a Challenging Political Climate. And that's probably like a lawyer thing that I gave a long title. So why don't we just call it Justice Delayed? The reason that I thought that was an appropriate way to describe the current state of affairs is I would argue that our long-term services and supports situation in this country is broken, that it's a crisis, that we have seen modest progress. And Bob, you know the numbers. So where were we like 15 years ago in terms of the percentage of dollars that were spent on institutional care, and where are we today?
About 80, 20, 64, 36.
Okay, so we've gone from 80% institutional to 64% institutional. On the one hand, that's significant progress, and again, ADAPT deserves a lot of credit for that. On the other hand, it's nowhere near where people want to get their supports. I mean, and I know I'm here in a room with researchers. What percentage of people who need long-term services and supports want to get them in an institution? Do we have a number for that? 0, or pretty small, okay? So again, we're out of balance. There's a serious imbalance, and the rate of change, as impressive as it may seem, is not impressive from my perspective, and it's unacceptable from my perspective because we still have people whose lives are being stolen by outmoded, anachronistic public policies, and we're not talking about it in a significant political way, which is the way we need to talk about it.